Have a roll call and certification of a quorum. Lonnie Ball, present. Mr. Wisnott,
Present.
Mr. Gilmore, absent. Mr. Lange,
Here.
present. Mr. Marcus is absent. Mr. Pyburn is absent. Mr. Reed,
Present.
Mr. Walters, Mr. Young.
Present.
So we have a quorum. If I count. Okay, now we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Anyone have any comments on the minutes from the previous meeting, October the 30th, 2017?
Mr. President, if there's no comments, I'd move approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Public comment. Do we have anyone? I have two that have requested to comment. Mr. Peckham?
Yes, sir.
Anyone who comments, please speak your name into the microphone before you start.
My name is Darrell Peckham, representing the Texas Desalinization Association. This is in regards to item F, the formation of a work group to work on the commingling issue. And I'd like to thank you all for creating the work group. I think this is a very important topic. It affects a significant part of the water well drilling and the groundwater development in the state of Texas. The Texas Desalinization Association, we desire modification of statutes and regulations to encourage the use of brackish groundwater resources to meet the state's needs. We have numerous leading engineers and scientists. We're working in the field of developing brackish groundwater with intimate knowledge of the state policy and regulations and their impacts to the boots on the ground for the creation of projects. We are a diverse association with more than 200 members representing over 100 companies, municipalities, and individuals. One of those individuals is your own council member, Steve Young here. He is a board member for the Texas Desalinization Association. We provide education outreach, which includes participating in legislative work groups and conducting annual conferences. Our concern regarding the current rule section 76.100C is that the vague language regarding definition of aquifers or zones and definition of differ in chemical quality create added uncertainty in the regulation of groundwater regarding the issue of preventing commingling of undesirable waters with desirable waters. This creates a question in projects and for drilling contractors who are responsible for implementing protection of the groundwater. It creates that issue of where is the line? Where do I have to, excuse me, where do I have to prevent the commingling? Where does it start? That line can be, what are the water quality parameters? You know, where's the trigger? Where's the limit on that? One of the things that we see is how much heterogeneity within an aquifer zone and in those water quality parameters. So what are the acceptable limits and levels of commingling? The meeting in October, an example of 2,000 milligrams per liter to 5,000 milligrams per liter. That's actually pretty easy. But what happens when it's 1,000 to 2,500? What is it when it's 3,500 to 4,500? And then what happens if it's 2,500 to 3,500? You know, we start, you know, it starts compounding itself in terms of uncertainty and when and difficulty in when do we have to engage. Is the line an aquifer name? Well, you have to isolate between Edwards Trinity and the Santa Rosa. Well, what happens when the Santa Rosa is subcropping against the Edwards Trinity? And the water quality is the same. The rock names are different. So there's, you know, this is very important work. Another issue that we've already run across is how long can we leave a borehole open while we're testing it to determine if we need to isolate it to prevent commingling. These are real questions that have already come up in the field. And obviously we have on a project that the communication between the project designers and the project implementers, the drilling contractors, have to make these decisions sometimes in the field. And so clarity in the guidance would very much benefit. We have 100 different groundwater regulatory bodies across the state. As they become more and more involved in the development of brackish groundwater and creating regulation to handle the commingling of waters issue, it can lead to piecemeal and even in some cases that we have already experienced, it can lead into a single well field having two sets of regulations. The drillers may have to follow two different guidelines, if you will, on how to prevent commingling from two different regulatory entities within a single well field if the dividing line between the districts cuts through that well field. And this does occur. Texas Desalinization would like to suggest that TDLR staff, working with y'all, set up a series of public stakeholder work sessions aimed at developing recommendations for improving the rule. Among the objectives of the public stakeholder work sessions, to articulate the TDLR's current interpretation of the rule, explain TDLR current process for enforcing the rule, determine where oversight exists on commingling issues among Texas regulatory agencies. We encourage the cooperation of the Railroad Commission, TCEQ, the groundwater districts, the TDLR. We feel that it's a very important issue.
Mr. Peckham, I know I didn't tell you this ahead, but we do have a 3-minute limit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, can I make one quick closing comment?
Sure, go ahead.
We support your efforts and to develop language which clarifies the conditions which require a licensed drilling contractor to isolate intervals to prevent commingling of undesirable and desirable groundwaters. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. C.J. Treadway.
Good afternoon. I'm C.J. Treadway, and I'm here on behalf of the Texas Oil and Gas Association, or TexOGA. TexOGA is a nonprofit corporation representing the interest of the oil and natural gas industry in Texas. The membership of TexOGA produces in excess of 90% of Texas's crude oil and natural gas, operates nearly 100% of the state's refining capacity, and is responsible for the vast majority of the state's pipelines. The oil and natural gas industry not only produces the products we use every day, it anchors our state's economy. In 2015, Texas's oil and gas industry paid $13.8 billion in taxes and royalties that directly fund our schools, roads, and emergency services. Chairman Ball and members of the council, I appear today on agenda item F. Water is critical to the production of oil and natural gas, and clear and consistent regulation is imperative. Therefore, TexOGA supports the formation of a work group relating to the commingling of groundwater, as we find the current rules on the subject to be vague. Further, we offer our expertise and respectfully request that a representative of TexOGA be on the work group. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Staff reports.
Good afternoon, Chairman, board members. I'm Lisa Hodag, Licensing Manager. The overall licensing report, I have included the first quarter of the new licenses issued, renewed, and total population. And of course, that's September, October, November. Be happy to answer any questions about that report. And I've also placed in front of you page 2, which is the number of applications received. That was a question at our last meeting. And so I have included, starting with fiscal year 09 to the first quarter this year, the driller and pump installer applications received and the apprentice applications received, just so you kind of get an idea of how many applications we receive, of course, and how many licenses that we issue. And of course, there is a difference in those numbers for various reasons. The drillers or apprentices may not meet the requirements. Their application may be incomplete. Also keep in mind that the application is only good for 1 year. So if they file in January and don't take the test until maybe the next January, then that's going to fall into the next month, or next year, I'm sorry. And that pretty much concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any of the board members have questions?
No questions.
Okay.
I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the information.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. Thank you for your service. I am Tre Seals, the Director of our Customer Service Division with the department, and it's the first time I've been up here before you, and so just wanted to take a minute to give a brief introduction about the Customer Service Division and what our mission is within the larger mission of the agency. Before I get to the report, just a quick rundown of why we do what we do, how we do it, and what we actually do. The why we do is because we believe that we're here as public servants to assist any of the industries and licensees and applicants and citizens with any questions they may have, and helping them to along their way to make that process as easy as we can, and looking for ways to improve and shorten things up, clarify information, and just generally assist and guide with the business of the agency with the industries. As Lisa just spoke on, several of the reasons the applications that we receive as an agency may need further information. Those end up in phone calls and emails that start with our division, and that speaks to what we actually do. We actually do take the initial contact by phone call or by email, and if we can point to a rule or a law or a part of the form, we do that over the phone or by email. If we don't have the expertise, then we do reach out to our licensing division, our compliance division, enforcement, or whichever area we need to reach out to get the information. And we'll either relate that to the customer, or we'll actually put the customer in contact with the particular individual they need to speak with within the agency. So we do serve as a messenger and a first point of contact for the agency. And we do that, how is just by asking questions. We have to be really good at knowing a little bit about everything the agency is involved in. So we do try to interview and dig a little bit and try to sort out what actually needs to happen, where the stop may be, and so that we can keep things moving to help customers achieve their objective, whether it's an application to get a decision, or if they need to find a water well driller or a pump installer. Whatever we can do, we do to help customers and licensees along the way. To move to the report, which I believe you do have with you there, as you can see, for the first quarter, September, October, and November for fiscal year 2018, the number of contacts have been pretty consistent from the water well driller and pump installer industries, and primarily happened through phone calls. And so I don't have a whole lot more to say other than that it correlates pretty directly with what Lisa was discussing in terms of the issues that they see from the applications they're receiving.
Mary Winston, TDLR. This is where I jump in and say, because it's just true, that customer service is one of our core competencies at the agency. And the numbers here indicate that it's more phone calls and fewer emails for your profession. But Tre's team handles every profession that we regulate. They have an awesome call center that has a board. You can see how long the calls take, what are the subjects. They follow trends in your industry. Your industry has been pretty consistent, as he said, but several of our other industries have trends that are in licensing or different things that change with the laws. And if our executive office needs those trends to see where the industry is going and where we need to be, that's what we rely on, Tre and his people. This is something that before we didn't have this report. It's something that we have relied heavily on customer service for. They handle front desk, they handle walk-ins, they handle calls and emails. They are our first responders, so to speak, at the agency. And we just took it for granted maybe a little bit that this was the norm for TDLR. We got some fresh blood in with some of our new programs in the person of Stephen Mills, who came in with our health programs.
Thank you, Stephen.
He noted, hey, there's a story here. These people are doing fantastic work. None of our advisory boards know this, how much they're doing and how they affect it. So with Stephen kind of making us aware that we may have been taking customer service for granted a little bit. How many foreign language speakers do we have in customer service? They do a lot. So for all of our advisory boards going forward, it will be Tre or one of his managers, ombudsmen, who come in and deliver statistics and reports. And if you have questions about what are the trends or are there licensing issues or what have you, they'll be able to get those answers for us. So this will be a report. This is going to be a regular report for advisory boards moving forward.
And on that note, I will add one other thing that as I'm doing the introduction for most of the advisory board meetings going forward. As needed, I will have other designees in my place as needed. And I have Irma Mendoza here today with me, and she is the manager responsible for the water well drill and pump installer program, along with several others, as Mary spoke of. We are, like she described in the other meeting, ducks on the water. We look pretty calm and collected, but underneath the surface, you can trust that we are kicking as quickly as we can to make sure we take care of everyone's needs that we serve in the agency for all the industries that are under our umbrella. I'm open to any questions you may have, and it's very nice to meet you.
Any questions?
I have one.
Sure.
Is there any way on this to, I guess, get an estimate of how many of the calls would be out-of-state inquiries?
That is possible for us to determine that information. I will say historically, and I'll turn to Irma as well as I state, but most of the calls we do get are concerning applications for folks here in Texas.
Yep.
But that is something we can take a look at and pay attention to as we move forward.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Enforcement Division.
Good afternoon, Chairman Ball and advisory board members. My name's Kimberly Davenport, and I'm with the Enforcement Division, here to bring you the staff report. Since the last time you met, up until November of the fiscal year 2018, there's been 2 default orders that have been entered by the department. These were both default orders against a landowner for failing to plug or cap a deteriorated or abandoned well. On one of the properties, there was 2 wells, so that's a difference in the penalty amounts, which the first case was a $6,000 penalty, and the second case was a $3,000 penalty. And one of the things I kind of wanted to point out to you, because I'm not sure if you've been made aware in the past, that we try really hard to get them into compliance before we go after administrative penalties. So a default order in this is basically our last resort. People send them letters and try to get their attention, and they notify them, and they give them plenty of time. So these are a result of cases actually that are from 2015, 2016, where we've tried and tried to get them to come into compliance and take care of the business. But they've yet to do so, and they've not complied with any requests from the department. None of the penalties in either of these cases have been paid, which is very common with default orders in these cases as well. And also because they're against landowners, it's a little different than if it's against a licensee, because we have a little more ability to do something to them to try to get some sort of compliance. Regarding the statistics, I wanted to point out a small error that was made, and I apologize for that. It said the statistics were for fiscal year 2017, but that was actually supposed to be 2018. We're still trying to get into the new swing of things, so I apologize. The number of cases in this particular program that have been opened for the fiscal year of 2018 are relatively small in comparison to all the cases for the department generally. As I had said, there were no agreed orders up until the November date. That's where the cutoff is, so there may be some that occurred in December or January, but we'll have that information for you at the next meeting. And there's been no penalties collected for any in particular regarding this particular program, although the department as a whole, in all the companies and all the programs, have assessed about over $600,000 in penalties and have collected close to half of that. Do you have any questions about either the statistics or in any of the cases that I highlighted for you today?
Questions?
These people are in default. What happens now if they don't pay it?
Well, we're looking into, sometimes they get referred to the Attorney General to try to collect the debts against them. It's because it's not a licensee, we can't freeze their license or go after their license and revoke their license. So it's a little different statistic and a situation that you have, but I think there's some talks regarding on how we get the AGs involved to go after these penalties for us to try to collect these penalties for the department.
And I will say something, Della Lindquist, Deputy General Counsel, we could also go through the Attorney General's office to perhaps get an injunction against them, and that's irrespective of whether they have a license or not, because the law requires them, they're under the umbrella of the law. The law requires them to fix it, the abandoned or deteriorated well within 6 months. So that's a possibility. And in fact, we could talk about that because that's very important to get that fixed.
Thank you.
I do have a question, Kimberly.
Yes.
What's the process by which you get information about whether or not there's a well that could be a candidate for, could being considered deteriorating? Do you work with GCDs, or do you, I mean, you just go out at random and look? How's
I
this
mean,
work?
our cases mostly result from our compliance inspectors that go out and check in terms of, and Vaughn, assist me at all in this, but, and they go and they check and they see if it's an abandoned or deteriorated, but they also will send them notice saying this needs to be plugged or capped. And they'll send that to the landowner and ask them to fix that. And they go out and they check and they see if they've done that. And they give them plenty of time and they make sure that they've made them aware, because they're supposed to be made aware by the well water drillers if they have found that.
Good afternoon. I'm Ron Foster. I'm one of the senior prosecutors. I actually prosecute these types of cases. So we do work closely with our compliance division. They find some of these types of wells that are out there when they're doing their audits and random inspections. But we also get reports from the groundwater districts that say, hey, we know that there's a problem out there, and they file a complaint with us, and then we get our team involved, get our compliance people out there to check it out. And, you know, they're the boots on the ground for us to make those determinations, because frankly, they're out there, they're all over the place. We don't know they're out there until we get a report about it.
That's good to hear.
Do you have any further questions?
I had one question, if I could. Actually, I'm going to ask as a reminder. Remind me under the statutes that apply and the process that we use here at the TDLR, what are the opportunities for remediation?
So I think there's probably a couple of different opportunities that happen for remediation. In the first place, if there's some kind of violation that's identified by our compliance team when they're out there, they're going to be trying to work with the water well driller to identify what the problem is and to make corrective actions. What happens is sometimes those people fall off the radar for whatever reason, and they get to me as a prosecutor. I send out notices of violations to them, telling them, hey, this is what we think we found on there. This is what we, then what usually happens is we hear back from them. Unlike what happened in the two earlier cases that were mentioned, most of the water well drillers that are licensed, they want to protect their license. They care about that. And they're going to reach out to us when they get that notice, and they're going to say, wait, what's going on? And a lot of times they just didn't know there was a problem. Other times there was a problem with the homeowner. Might have been disputes going on that our team, our compliance folks, they're great at mediating some of those situations where the homeowner doesn't really want to talk to the driller doesn't want to talk to the homeowner, and our program specialist goes out there, coordinates with them to try to make sure that the corrective actions can be taken that need to be done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have, so after, if it's been abandoned or wherever it's plugged, does TDLR go out and check, make sure it's been done according to all the rules?
We do on occasion, yes. I mean, we do audits, so we don't necessarily check every one of the cases. So, of course, if we've got a consumer complaint case and the person's involved, we're going to know pretty damn quick, because they're going to be having the homeowner right out there checking, saying, hey, he didn't do the job, he didn't get it done right. But when there's situations about whether or not it was done to the technical standard,
Okay.
I'll call our compliance folks and I'll have them, they work really great with us to coordinate going out to those sites and determining whether or not they've complied as they were supposed to according to the technical standards. So we're not just relying on their words, but a lot of times I can just get a photo that can help, or a video, and it can help corroborate what they're telling me, and I can have David Gunn or someone on his team look at it and they're like, yeah, it looks like they fixed that. They did the surface completion right now, or they did that. And so we don't need to send out our limited resources to every one of these wells, throughout the whole state, trying to do that. So we do it sparingly as we can, but we do use we work very closely, enforcement and compliance does, to make sure the right thing gets done, because at the end of the day, our biggest concern is whether or not the water is, injurious waters are being commingled somehow with other types of waters, and there's even disputes about whether or not it is injurious or not. We get our folks involved to try to get out there and make sure that we get the well fixed to the standards that it needs to be done. And for enforcement, compliance is our experts on that.
So one last question. So in Bandera County, where I guess they've had their recent legislation so they can do their own abandonment, do they provide the final check, or is there any, does TDL also have some enforcement to check whether the well's been properly abandoned?
We always have the enforcement as a state agency. We have the jurisdiction
Okay,
to
so
go
we
out
have
there and
the
do that.
final say on that issue?
But they usually work with us. 'Cause, I mean,
Okay.
we're on the same team.
I realize that, I
You
just
know.
didn't know who had the final.
Yeah, I mean, as the state, we have the final determination
Okay.
about that, but our compliance people work so closely with them. They know a lot of these folks by, first names and everything, so they can work with them and find out what needs to be done or if there's a problem area, and they can get out there and look at it. Ultimately, we do rely upon them. They have expertise locally with what's going on. So, I mean, I don't know if there's ever been a situation where they've said that there was a problem that was rectified and we looked at it and said, no, it wasn't. But if that occurred, I guess it would be brought to my attention by our compliance team, and we'd have to decide whether or not we needed to go after that water well driller. Because ultimately, I'm going to look at what the state law is, and I'm going to apply that. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes, I just
Okay.
didn't know what the rule, statute actually says. Thank you.
And one other thing I wanted to point out as part of enforcement and our investigators is when they do have these referrals, they make contact with whoever our respondent is, whether it be a licensee or a landowner, and attempt to get, evidence that this has been done or reminding them. So it's taken pretty seriously to try to walk them along to do what they're supposed to do. So usually when you see a default order, we've probably exhausted every remedy in terms of contacting them, asking them for photo evidence to show us, yes, they've done what they were supposed to do.
Anyone else? No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. Education and Examination Division.
Good afternoon, Chairman Ball, members. I'm Fanny Pringle with the Education Examination Division. I believe you have our division report. I do have some updates to the first page, our new division org chart. We filled some vacancies. Our Inspector 4 position has been filled by Amy Henshaw. She is going to be handling inspections in Dallas. She has a master's degree in criminal justice from UTA and a Texas Civil Process server certification. Our driver offender and safety education team leader position has been filled as well by Angela Schmidt. She comes to us from DPS, where she's the program supervisor for handgun licensing. And she has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Cameron University and extensive experience developing and providing instructor training. So she'll be invaluable to our team. We're excited to have her. The next few pages, we have statistics on continuing education courses and providers, and then we have a couple pages of examination pass rate statistics. We did meet with the pump installer and water well driller examination review committees this past November on the 7th, 8th, and 9th. We reviewed 95 poorly performing question items, and poorly performing question items are those questions that are statistically everybody is getting right or everybody is getting wrong. And so we take a closer look at them to make sure that there's no extraneous language that's confusing the applicants, that the answer choices aren't ridiculous, that they're plausible but incorrect. We make sure that they reflect that they're relevant to industry in case sometimes we don't want things that are too obscure, that don't really reflect minimum competency levels and things like that. We also approved 101 new question items, and the work completed will be reflected on the republication of the exam on March 1st. Do you have any questions?
Questions? If none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Compliance Division.
Good afternoon, members. David Gunn with the Compliance Division. Updates on meetings attended. On December 13th, Alberto Jimenez, program hydrologist, attended and participated in the Texas Groundwater Protection Committee, public outreach, and groundwater issues subcommittees. On November 14th, Adam Foster met with Janet Guthrie with the Hemp Hill County Groundwater Conservation District to discuss local drillers. Ms. Guthrie also requested training for one of her 2 new district field techs. On December the 5th, Alberto met with Andy Garcia from the Kennedy Groundwater Conservation District. Now, this is supposed to be another bullet, but somehow a typo happened. Alberto and Adam conduct outreach and meet with groundwater districts when we send them out on a trip to go do random inspections and whatever. They also stop by the groundwater districts and see if they need anything, or they stop by and talk to drillers too when they're in the area. On January 10th, I attended and participated in the, I will participate in the Texas Groundwater Protection Committee of the Whole. Update on our field activities. Since the previous meeting, Alberto's conducted 8 compliance inspections, 1 lead investigation, and 1 abandoned well. It was the holidays after all. Since the previous meeting, Adam conducted 29 random compliance inspections, 3 lead investigations, and investigated 8 abandoned wells. I received 9 variances, issued 7, and 2 were withdrawn by the applicant. Exam item development. Back in November through the 9th, we met with PSI to come up. Before that, we wrote a lot of questions for the exam review. Out of all those questions we wrote, we were able to add 62 new exam items to the pump installers exams and 39 for the drillers. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Anyone?
What are the variances for, do you know?
If they are in a situation where they can't comply with the rules, then they can request a variance. For example, if they can't get 50 feet from the property line, they can request a variance, and we look at it, do a little research in the area, see if it's going to mess up anything, if he does it or not, and then issue it based on completing the well so that it protects the groundwater. Additional cementing in the annular space and all that.
Thank you.
David, is that type of an effort coordinated with any overlapping jurisdiction?
I copy the groundwater conservation districts if they're located in one when I issue the variance.
Thank you.
No problem. Any more questions?
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Executive Office.
Mr. Chairman and board members, I'm Nick Boenis of TDLR, and I'm joined today with our Deputy Executive Director, Carla James, sitting to my left. I want to wish you a Happy New Year. Thank you for being here today, and of course, thank you for your service to the state of Texas. Here to bring you our Executive Office report, kind of a summary of what's been going on around the agency these days. Our staff's been busy over the last few months in implementing legislation that was passed over the last couple of years. It's a process that continues as we're all involved in developing and reviewing rules, communicating to stakeholders, appointing and prepping advisory boards, hiring additional staff, and dealing with education exams, IT programs, and more. Majority of the work has been completed, but this is a process that will continue as we implement programs this year and next. 2018 is a year that where we take our statute-driven, every other year strategic planning exercise on. We'll be going through that important process again this spring. The last time we met, we were in the middle of helping our licensees and small businesses along the Texas Gulf Coast recover from the devastation of Hurricane Harvey. We worked with the governor's office and Governor Abbott's Rebuild Texas efforts, and were successful in implementing procedures to help all eligible licensees in the area to help them recover, return to work as quickly as possible. Our Harvey focus now is on the rebuild by protecting small business and consumers, avoid unlicensed activity, and ensuring that they receive quality work for their hard-earned dollars. We've got information on this and more can be found on our website, tdlr.texas.gov, and on the governor's Rebuild Texas site. Back to our site for a minute, we like to refer to our website as our window to the world, and it's our chief communications tool to communicate with our stakeholders and with the public. Wanted to share with you some recent web traffic numbers concerning the Water Well Drillers site over the past 6-month period. You guys have had 26,211 page views. That's an average of 143 page views a day. A majority of those do so from a desktop computer. 58% of those visitors accessed your site from a desktop computer, while 35% did so from a smartphone and 6% did so from a tablet. The top reasons for visiting the site are, number one, frequently asked questions, followed by laws and rules, well construction and plugging specifications, forms, and exam information. And just wanted to tell you that we're always looking at our sites to make them better, make them more fresh, more user-friendly. And please, if you have any feedback, please pass it along to us as well. Would like to also plug our social media efforts, our Facebook and Twitter accounts, if you'd like to keep up with our, another way of keeping up with our events and activities. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members, and be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the appointment of a work group to address commingling of groundwater and how it affects water quality, and possible recommendations for addressing the concerns. Okay. Do I have any members of the council that want to volunteer?
I have a couple questions on just, when we say a work group, are we talking about TDL staff conducting the work group with advisory group
Mary Winston,
helping?
when we're talking work group, we are talking the council as well as staff. David Gunn is the one that we lean
Right.
on very heavily to conduct that work group. And doesn't have to be in person. Everyone's busy in different parts of the state. David would coordinate telephone conferences or whatever he would need to make that work group effective.
So is advisory staff then actually a member of that working group, or just in just a consulting staff?
A member of the work group
Okay,
would
so the meetings
consist
would be
of,
attending a meetings and being a.
yeah, it wouldn't be this formal because we have to catch y'all as catch can. And it would be an agreed upon time that David would coordinate for you. And yes, the members that your presiding officer could just volunteer you, but and say do it. But those people in that work group would participate in that conversation. What typically happens is you have the meeting, whatever the topic is. You have that meeting. The work group meets, comes up with a report, and comes back and presents that report in this open meeting forum.
Would they be open to the public, or is that an option? What's been done in the past?
In the past, we have what the work groups consist of members of the council. Members of that advisory council are board. We have 31 advisory boards. And when we have work groups, I think we have a couple of 100,000 cosmetologists. So when we hold a work group, it's members of that advisory council or board. Now, typically they come back and they present that report, If it's something that needs to have a public forum at that time for others to have input, that's possible as well. And if outside industry is brought in, the work group would then appoint a task force.
Okay.
When we bring in outside individuals, that's when we have a task force. That's not noticed today, it's just the work group.
Right.
So if we could, if it's the will of Chairman Ball to get that moving, if some of you guys volunteer, then the work group could first meet, come up with their findings. They could then decide to appoint a task force. We have people here interested possibly in being in that task force, and that would come at a later meeting.
Okay, I think that's fairly clear.
I can participate via conference call, David.
Reed?
Put me down, I guess.
I'd like to volunteer too. I could attend most of those in person. Not all of them.
And we have 3, we can have 4 if we have someone else who wants to join that party. Mr. Reed,
That
you're
only
already
leaves
involved.
one person other than the presiding officer. That
He could be a
I'll be glad to help where I can.
Thank you, Mr.
And I'm not going to assume where the meetings are going to be held, but with a reasonable amount of notice, I could physically attend.
Did you hear that, David?
I got it.
Okay. And so we have handled this item of appointment of the work group. You have general marching orders, so to speak. David will handle contacting you, and we'll go from there. Does that sound good, Mr. Ball?
That sounds good. So the members will be Mr. Ray Reed, Mr. Bill Lange, Mr. Stephen Young, Mr. Ray Wizenot.
Sounds familiar.
And do I have to name David, or is he just part of it,
Automatic.
I'm just there.
automatic?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need to vote on this, right?
We do not. You have spoken.
Okay. We will move on to discussion of possible recommendations to adopt amendments 16 TAC 76, 7610, 7662, and others.
Good afternoon. Della Lindquist, Deputy General Counsel. Back on October 30th, only just a couple months ago, really, you were here and reviewed these rules, this set of rules for us to publish. We published them November 10th in the Texas Register and for the public comment, and we received no comments. The publication period closed December 28th. So I bring these rules back before you today with no recommended changes in the same condition that you looked at them on October 30th. And so what we're asking you to do today is to recommend that the commission adopt them at their next meeting, which would be February 20th, to be effective. If a miracle happens, it could be March 15th, but most likely it would be April 1st. And I'm sure we're happy to answer any questions you have about any of these rules.
Questions?
The primary reason, we did this, it was a 4-year rule review. We wanted to add the fiberglass as an option, and then we did a lot of just cleanup, mainly of some existing statutes, clarifying what was there.
Did everyone agree with the fiberglass?
Pardon me?
No comments
Yeah.
in the published time, so I guess everybody agreed.
You mean from your group or from the public?
Both.
Oh, we didn't receive any public comments, which is kind of unusual. Usually there's at least 1 or 2, but, yeah.
Well, if there are no other questions, would I need to make a specific motion or simply move to have the board recommend the presented rule changes to the commission?
You would just recommend that the commission adopt them at their next meeting on February 20th, to be
I'd so move.
effective probably April 1st.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Wisnott, seconded by Mr. Reed. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. And we may be reopening up the rule, you know, if the work group wants to discuss that whole 76.100 issue, but we may be looking at that at your next meeting, so, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Recommendations for agenda items for the next council meeting?
Well, Mr. Ball, first agenda item, Mary Winston again, would be work group
Work
report.
group. Yes,
Yes.
When is the next council meeting?
that's next order there. Discussion of date, time, location of the next council meeting.
Is that when we would need to discuss a task group?
That is, we would, also, if you want that on the agenda, at that meeting, we would have to put that on the agenda, possible appointment of a task force, right? But I don't know if you want that work group to meet first and make that decision, if you all see fit, or if you want to have that as an agenda item, put on the agenda for next time, and if you don't want to do it, we can just pass on it. It's just that we have to notice it. We can pass on it, but we have to notice it if that's a possibility.
Or you could put it on as a consideration of a possible task force, and if we
That's
don't
right.
do it, we just don't do it. So
That's
it's-
right, we would pass on it, or
So
the
it seems-
work group would come back and say, we decided not to do that,
So-
but we can do that.
I suggest that option be listed.
Okay.
Task force just makes recommendations to the work group, correct?
True. It would just be, the work group would meet, and then the task force is bringing outside industry or outside of the council information, and that would be, yes, for the work group to consider, bring forth. It would be more information brought in to this meeting.
And a task force could include other regulatory agencies, such as Railroad Commission, or asking what they, or
We can always ask.
we work with them, but is that separate from it? That goes
We
outside the
can
ring?
always ask other people to come, we just can't make them come.
Okay.
So,
okay. That's fine. Just making sure that's separate from a task force, other agencies.
yes,
Okay.
we're not, it's great working with other agencies. We work with the groundwater, but the different railroad commission. Have we ever done that, David?
Yeah, we work with Railroad Commission and TCP.
Yeah. So,
The program does, not as, the
Right.
agency as a whole, but,
and that's something, I'm not gonna make you walk up there unless we keep doing this, but,
yeah.
okay, thank you. Gotta get the microphone, David. But, yeah, this is really a hands-on program, and David talks to everybody. So that's not, if they're willing to do it, if that's what the work group comes back with, we will talk to whomever. If they
Okay.
wanna talk to us, we just can't make them talk back.
I understand, thank you.
Discussion of date, time, and location, next council meeting.
Mr. Chairman, Nick Volinas here. In talking with Della, we've come up with some dates for you, some possible dates, late spring. If you'd like to keep them on Fridays, we've got Friday, May 11th, Friday, May 18th, or Friday, June 1st. Choice those, or there's some other.
I'm currently open on any
Check
of those
out.
dates.
Mr. Weiser, not available on any of those things?
I'm currently open for any of
Okay.
those dates.
Oh, awesome.
I believe I am as well.
Same here.
June 1st is Austin Homes Open House. For that weekend, which would work good
I couldn't
Here
tell you, I
Friday and
couldn't tell
then
you,
go.
I don't go anymore.
for Saturday. It'll work.
June
Available.
1st.
I'm available, and I would have a preference for the earliest date.
May 11th,
May 11th is fine.
Friday, May 11th, 1 PM. Is that okay?
Mhm.
Thank
Same
you.
location, here.
Same location, yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, if I could intercede, I'll offer a second to that motion with a general point of comment. And I was sitting here thinking about something. I think I may be currently one of the more senior members of this group. But I'd like to say that I'm looking forward to serving on this committee, if for no other reason than to find what may be some current abilities to work with other state agencies, along with some support from their associations, on a common issue that's come before us that has been there as long as I've been on this board. So hopefully we can make some headway.
I completely agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe I had a motion by Mr. Reed.
And
a
my
second by
silence is a
Mr.
second.
Wisner. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.